Hey guys, Constance here from Cosmopolitan Cornbread. So this is it. My farmhouse kitchen project is finally finished. If you are new here, just a little bit of background. My husband and I bought our property just over 4 years ago. And when we were house hunting, looking for our forever home, there were a number of things that we wanted, and then there was a number of things that we'd hoped for. And one of those things that we were hoping to find was an older home, something with some character. You know, many years ago we had lived in this century-old farmhouse and we absolutely fell in love with it. And we had hoped to someday find something like that to call our own. But when it came time to actually settle down and find our place, we just didn't find anything like that. At least not that was in any condition that we wanted to take on. So ultimately we ended up finding our home here. It was the perfect size. It had everything that we needed, but it didn't have the character, that farmhouse feel that we had hoped for. And so what I just simply decided to do was make some changes to the house, particularly the kitchen, and give it that farmhouse feel that we love but just weren't able to find. So the day I got the keys for the house, the very first thing I did after setting up all of the utilities was I began painting. I painted the kitchen, the office, the living room, the hallway, and I just got as much done as I could before the movers arrived with all of our household goods to be delivered. And so originally I painted the kitchen a sage green color, and I liked it because I love sage green, but last year I decided I wanted to go a little bit brighter, and I changed it to the color that you see here. Some of the other things that needed to be done to the kitchen weren't just because I was trying to create a farmhouse feel, but because there was actually some damage to our kitchen. The original owners had had an oven fire, so the range that was here when we moved in, it worked, but the back of it was damaged. You couldn't read the clock. And so I ordered a new range and it came in that very first week and I swapped it out. Now the one that I had purchased was a stainless steel and black one. It was fine, except right after the warranty ran out, I started having electrical problems with it and it became its own fire hazard. And so it had to go. And I replaced it with this just classic plain white range that you see behind me. And the other thing, of course, I did was I replaced the hood. Initially, the one that I put in was stainless steel to match the stove. But as I went through and I started working on my kitchen and making it brighter and clean, and when I replaced the range, it no longer matched the range hood. And so I swapped out the range hood, put in a white one, just clean, classic, and I donated the other one since there was nothing wrong with it. I took that to the Restore Warehouse, which supports Habitat for Humanity. Now, in addition to the range and the range hood, the other damage was the ceiling, the light fixtures, and the kitchen cabinets themselves. Right away, I began working on the lighting. The very first thing I changed was the light over the kitchen table. The one that was originally there definitely was not my style. And of course, as I said, it was soot damaged and all of that. And so what I did was I had this wooden beam that I had been carrying around with me for many years, and I knew that someday I wanted to do something with it. And inspiration struck, and so I turned that wooden beam into a rustic style kitchen light. Very simple project. I have a video where I talk about exactly how I went through and did that, and I will put a link to that down below if you're interested. I also swapped out the overhead light that is in the working area of the kitchen. Now, it wasn't what I wanted to begin with, but it was a temporary fix because the one that was there originally, it was just the ugly tube lighting. It didn't work properly. It was missing the shade. And so I just got a simple LED one to put up there temporarily until I could figure out what I wanted to do with the kitchen ceiling itself. It had been soot stained from the fire. The original owners had painted over it. It looked terrible. I hated the awful texture that was on there, and so I knew I needed to do something. I just didn't know what. And so that project itself kind of got put on the back burner and was really going to be the last thing because I needed to figure out what I wanted to do. So another early thing that happened in the kitchen was I removed the dishwasher. I am not a huge fan of dishwashers. I actually enjoy washing the dishes. I find it relaxing. And I think dishwashers are a waste of energy and water and all of that. And really, when you have a smaller home, a dishwasher can take up a lot of space. It could really be used as storage. And so that very first year, the dishwasher got removed, taken out, and instead I have some very simple shelving that I installed in there, and I have a curtain that hangs in the front, and so now I've got some nice handy storage right there where the useless dishwasher used to be. Now the kitchen cabinets that came in our kitchen are actually really good quality cabinets. I think they're custom built. They are solid oak, just really well built, sturdy cabinets. They were just in really bad shape as far as the finish went because, again, the oven fire. The finish was really damaged from being scrubbed, and it just really needed a facelift. But I didn't want to replace them because they were, like I said, really good quality cabinets. Now, I have always loved a classic white farmhouse kitchen, and so I painted all of the kitchen cabinets the white that you see here, and I replaced the handles with some cast iron types of very simple handles. My laundry room sits off of the kitchen here, and one of the things that I did in there, because it's a decent sized laundry room, but I always need more storage when it comes to the kitchen. And so I built some very simple shelving in there. I did that right away after we moved in, and then a few months ago, or maybe a few weeks ago, I kind of reworked them, added some more shelvings, made the shelves themselves a little bit more sturdy, and am very happy with the finished product in there. And since it's right off the kitchen, and my kitchen doesn't really have an actual pantry, that kind of serves as a pantry area for me. Now on this wall back here, you can see a shelving unit. This is one that I built several years ago before we lived here. And when I got on a roll painting everything, I painted the cabinets white. I went ahead and I painted that white as well. And you can see where there used to be another shelf up in the top. I removed that so that I can hang all of my cast iron skillets as well as a few other skillets up there. And I don't use my microwave very often, so that kind of sits over there too, out of the way and not taking up real estate on my kitchen counter. Now I also have a water filter that sits over there. It's not actually a Berkey. It looks just like a Berkey, but mine is actually made by a company called Alexipure. Very similar, does the same thing. Just after doing my homework, I felt like that one was better suited for my needs. And so I have that over there. It actually sits on an old stool that I found at an antique shop. I had been looking for some sort of stand for the water filter, and I came across that, and I thought it was perfect. I love going antiquing. There's a lot of things in my home and in the kitchen here that are antique finds, including the light over my kitchen sink. One of the antiques that I love is milk glass, and I have several things that are hobnail milk glass. And so when I found this particular light, I just knew it was perfect. And while it's not the classic white milk glass, it's sort of a translucent color, the hobnail design, I just felt like it was perfect for the kitchen. Now there wasn't any actual electrical part to it, and so what I did is I just got a very simple pendant light, ordered it from Amazon, hung it up there, and it hangs down into the middle of the globe, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. Now right down here in the middle, I have an antique table. This was actually built in the 1800s from what I was told, and I got this to serve as sort of an island. I loved the contrast of everything being so white and bright in here, and then this old dark wood. The bowl that sits on it with the implements is an antique, belonged to my grandmother. The doily is a find from the antique store. Oh, and over there in the corner you can see one of my canners sitting out. Right now it is hardcore canning season, and so I don't even bother putting that away because I am using it a lot right now. As a matter of fact, this afternoon I will be canning up some pork loin for the pantry. This part of the kitchen is my work area. I do a lot of my food prep over on this side. I have a spice rack that I built, a very easy DIY project. I have a video where I talk about that as well as a blog post. I will put a link down below if you are interested in making one like that. So now all of the things about the kitchen that I have talked about are projects that were done over time, over the course of a few years, but the ones I'm going to touch on now are kind of the newest ones, and really they were the finishing touches for this kitchen. So first of all, you can see the Hoosier cabinet here behind me. I have always loved Hoosier cabinets, always wanted to have one, but usually when I saw them in antique stores, the prices just made me choke. And I'm frugal. I will spend money on things that need to be spent on, but I'm very frugal about most things, and I just couldn't bring myself to pay the prices that most of the antique stores were wanting for these. But I walked into one of the shops here last year and I saw this, and when I saw the price, I knew I had to have it. And so brought it home, and it now serves as my coffee bar. I have my coffee maker set up there. I have some antique cookbooks, most of which belonged to my grandmother. I have an antique hobnail milk glass lamp. I really like coming in the morning and getting my first cup of coffee without having to turn on the overhead light. And so that lamp just has a little nightlight bulb in there. And so I can come out, I can get my first cup of coffee, and I can just kind of ease into the day gently. Up on top of the Hoosier are mason jars, antique blue mason jars that belonged to my grandmother, along with a lovely pottery pitcher that was given to me by a sweet friend. And there's a wood bowl up there, again, something that belonged to my grandmother. I love antiques, I love heirlooms. My kitchen table is a solid oak table. It was actually a gift from my parents many years ago. The chairs that go with it actually belonged to my grandmother. And she loved going antiquing too. She would go to estate sales and she would find pieces of furniture that were just dilapidated and abused with layers of terrible paint. And she just was so talented at restoring these old pieces. And these particular chairs that I have actually came from a speakeasy, and I believe it was in Crystal Lake, Illinois. So she restored these chairs and she had them for many years in her house. So then let me talk about the ceiling. After I had gotten all of the kitchen kind of coming together and beginning to look like I wanted it to, and having that farmhouse feel, the ceiling still needed to be addressed. Because had the previous owners not painted it, I could have removed that texture and started it from scratch. But because they painted it, that kind of makes removing it a huge ordeal. And so the plan was to cover it up, and I was going to purchase these types of ceiling tiles that were kind of ornate, very old-fashioned looking. But then I had an idea strike, and I thought, you know what? Why don't I do a faux shiplap? And so that is what I did. The faux shiplap was a really easy project. I do have a video again where I talk about how we did that, the materials that we used, and all of that. I will put a link down below if you are interested. Now the vent covers that are up there, I didn't want to replace them with the same kind of plain vent covers that were there originally, and so I found these beautiful cast aluminum and powder coated ones that had a bit of an ornate pattern. I thought they would be the perfect way to finish off the ceiling project. Now I mentioned paint colors earlier, and I know that's a question that I get pretty frequently. The color that I put on the walls, that very pale color, is called Ivy Shadow, and it is Valspar signature paint, and it's in the satin. I wanted the satin because it's washable. This is a kitchen after all. Things get splattered and messes need to be cleaned up, and so it's a durable enough paint that I can wash it down, wipe it down. The kitchen cabinets are in the color Ultra White, and while you can buy paint that comes as a base that's ultra white, there is a tiny bit of tint that is added to create the color Ultra White. And again, this was a Valspar paint, and it was designed for doors and trim and things that take a lot of wear and tear and abuse. The cabinets were done in a high gloss because they are white, and I do want them to be able to hold up to lots of washing and cleaning and all of that. The ceiling is also a white color, but I didn't want to go ultra white with the ceiling. I thought it would be a little too stark. And so the color that I chose for the ceiling is called Dove White, and just like the walls, it is a satin finish, and it is again the Valspar signature paint. Now, one other thing about the ceiling, when we purchased our house, there was no type of crown around the room. There was trim around the cabinets, but when we redid the ceiling and when I painted the cabinets, I pulled all of that trim down. And the way it was positioned, once we put a skin over the ceiling, I didn't think that trim would work. And it was a little ornate, and I was going to need trim that went all the way around the room. And so because we were going for a very old, simple farmhouse feel, I trimmed out the ceiling all the way around, the walls, the cabinets, and everything with a very simple 1x2 trim. Again, I was going for rustic, primitive, nothing fancy. And we love the way it turned out. And so the final touch, the thing that completed this entire project, was over here on this wall next to the Hoosier. I installed a wall of cabinets. Now, when we purchased this house, we intentionally bought a smaller home. We didn't ever want to feel the need to downsize. We were looking at being empty nesters, so we didn't need a lot of room. But the one thing that this house was lacking was storage, especially for the kitchen. Now, when I started really working on the kitchen here, I put a cabinet over there, just a really cute little cabinet I had picked up from Hobby Lobby, and I had turned that into my coffee bar. I had some shelves over it, had my grandmother's jars up there along with a couple other little decorations. I got some S-hooks from the hardware store and I painted them with some spray paint in a dark bronze type of color so that they matched the metal that was already on those shelves, and turned that into the rack to hold some coffee cups. And I really liked that coffee bar, except like I said, I needed more storage. And so I went ahead and I went to my local hardware store and I picked up some stock cabinets. They're nothing fancy. They were inexpensive. Now, the sides and everything were not solid oak like my other kitchen cabinets, but the fronts were oak, and really I was just looking to have some extra storage. So I picked up 6 of the 2-door units and I installed them on this wall over here, and they're kind of stacked. I painted them white so that they would kind of match the cabinets already existing in the kitchen, but the doors have a slightly different design, and so I didn't want it to be too matchy-matchy, and so I decided, instead of putting the same handles that I have on the rest of my kitchen cabinets, I ordered some handles that are jadeite glass. And they look like the old type of handle that you would see on antique pieces of furniture. And so it kind of created this illusion of it being a single piece of furniture built into the kitchen. And I just love the feel of it. I'm very happy with the way it turned out. Now, as I said, these were stock cabinets and the sides and everything were not oak. So the side that was exposed over here next to the Hoosier was just sort of that particle board, ugly stuff, and I didn't really want to paint it because it still wouldn't look very good. And I realized the lip of the front of the cabinet was pretty thin, and it was the perfect size to do faux shiplap. So just yesterday, I went and I cut some of those planks to fit that space on the side of the cabinets, installed them, painted them to match the rest of the cabinet, and then I ran to the hardware store, picked up some trim, and finished off the edges along the wall on both sides and on the corner right there, and it turned out fantastic. So that is my farmhouse kitchen renovation. All of the projects that we did were very simple. We weren't looking for a whole new kitchen. I just wanted to create the feel of a farmhouse, give it that character that it didn't have when we bought it. You know, it was just a cookie cutter. It didn't have any character, and so by doing these very simple things, as I could find the time, it has really transformed this kitchen, and you would almost think it was in a completely different house. So that is it. Thanks for coming along with me and going through the kitchen and seeing how things have progressed. And I'm really happy to finally have this project completed. If there are any questions you may have in regards to the materials used or how we did any of the things in here, if I forgot to touch on them, please leave them in the comments down below and I will be sure to provide you any information that I can. If you are new here and you just happened upon my channel to see this kitchen tour, I am a writer and I have a website, cosmopolitancornbread.com, where you can find hundreds of recipes and articles. I also write for a magazine and I am a columnist for a newspaper. And here on the YouTube channel, I do at least 3 videos a week on homesteading, home cooking, and back to basics. So thanks for hanging out with me here in the Homestead Kitchen. My name is Constance, Cosmopolitan Cornbread, and I'll talk to y'all next time.